Hello and welcome to lecture number 9 in Objective-C programming course. This is the lecture where we are going to talk about basic core data and a little bit about panels and new windows in our application. So recall the application we were working on last two lectures. It was a table view with employees, and we could add new employees, remove them, change values of them, save the file, undo, redo, all that stuff. It was great. It was quite easy to make, but we wrote a little bit of code. The code is not that problematic. The thing that is not that perfect is the fact that we were thinking about two types of terms. So we had this notion of an employee, and that's something from the real world. And this is mostly what we have in applications. We take some notions from our world and we try to represent them somehow in the computer and then convert in some entities that the computer can understand and can work with, the programming language can work with, and work on those. And that's fine, but it's not that awesome because we could be thinking about something closer to what we used to in our real world. So with the person, we needed to represent a person as a class and the name of the person as a variable in that class of some type. So we had to think about the type of that variable and then save it in the class, then have something like a constructor. And if we didn't have automatic reference counting, we were to think about managing memory, stuff like this. And this just gets to be a big distraction from the problem you're trying to solve. And with the person, it was quite easy because it was a name as a string and a salary as a float. But most of the time, you're going to have applications that are much more complicated, and you're going to have a lot of fields and a lot of stuff to think about. But we have good news. Apple knows that most of the time you write applications like that. You have some data and you want to use that data and you want to work with that data as if it was a document, and the data has some models and those models have different properties, and you want to work with those properties, save them, load them, do all the stuff we managed to do last time manually. So Apple gave us something called core data. And basically core data is a way to work with documents and applications like we did last time without thinking too deep. We can stop thinking on a level which is quite high. And instead of thinking about classes and variables and functions, we can think about abstract entities and properties of those entities. In the example of a person, we could think about entity called a person and the properties of that entity, which is a name of the person and the salary, the expected raise of the person. So there are three things that are mostly important in this lecture. And first two are familiar to you from the last lecture. We have an NS array controller, and that is a gateway to the array, to the collection of objects we're going to use. We have bindings, and those were easy to make because we didn't write any code to connect different pieces from interface and the model. And now we have an NS managed object context, and that thing takes care of observing our objects, managing undo, redo, saving, and loading. Because, well, we did it last time because we needed to know how it's done, but we no longer need to do it most of the time because document-based applications all look alike. They have a document, they have some entities, and we want to save and load properties of those entities. So with core data, it's so easy to make an application without really writing any code. Now let's create one without having any code. And of course, the application itself will have a lot of code. It just will be generated for us. We're not going to write it ourselves. So the difference is instead of having NS document like last time, we're going to have an NS persistent document. And that is something that will take care of managing to observe those documents and updating the values accordingly. It's just like magic. We don't have to think about observing documents and having that key value coding and observing, stuff like that. So let's jump into it. I have my Xcode. By the way, I have updated to 4.5.1. There's not much difference in terms of this course, but just to be on the same page with many students, I'm going to create a new application. There would be a default Cocoa application, going to call it CarLot. I want to have an application which is sort of a database of my cars, and let's say I'm selling a lot of used cars. So I want to have something to keep track of all the cars, the prices of that car, the names, the pictures, and maybe some sort of special offer for a car. So I'm going to create a document-based application. So if you didn't change it last time, this should still be enabled. And now I want to select this, use core data. By default, it's disabled, so don't miss it. Click on use core data, and yeah, you should put something in document extension, and I'm just going to use the same name, CarLot. Going to click next, save it. Actually, I have it in my documents and code. Let's save it here. Okay, so now I have my application created, and this is core data enabled document-based application. The first thing you would do if you didn't know about core data or you didn't have a core data is to create a class that would represent a car. That would be your model. Now, in this case, we're not going to create a class per se, but it's basically a class, but we don't have to think about classes and files and stuff like that. Now I'm going to create something called an entity, and it's what it is. It's an entity of my model. The only thing I'm going to have here is a car. So I'm going to create a new entity called car. And on the right, you have different fields for that entity. I have attributes, relationships, and fetched properties. We're not going to talk about last two this time. We're interested in attributes. And those are just like variables in your class. So for my car, I want to have different attributes like the price of my car. And the price would be decimal. And I want to have a photo of my car. And for that, I'm going to use a file, but I have to select transformable here. So let's also have a condition of my car. And that would be something like an integer. Then let's have a date my car was purchased. And the date is, well, I have a date here. Also, let's have, of course, the name of my car. Let's call it make model. And that would be a string. Now, you see, I'm not thinking about class called NSString. I'm just thinking about the type of this attribute. And I don't care about what this language does. And let's call something on special. There would be a Boolean variable, and it's going to be to represent if my car is on sale. For some reason, this just gets unset. So this is a date, and make model is a string, and on special is Boolean. Okay. All right. Now I have my model now, and I didn't create any class myself, but it's basically a class called a car. Let's go to my document.zip. This is my interface. So before I'm digging into my interface, actually, I want to create that array controller, something as a gateway to my model, to the collection of cars. So I'm going to search for array controller here in object library, drag one here, and it gets selected. So now I want to point it to my objects. So I'm going to go to bindings menu, bindings panel in this inspector, and last thing here I have is managed object context. So I'm going to select bind to files owner, and the key path would be managed object context. This is the context of all the objects my application is managing. Okay, so now I want to say that this array controller will work with the model I just created, and that is called a car. So I'm going to go here and set this mode to entity name. I didn't create a class myself, I created an entity. So I'm going to set this to entity name, and that should be car. Okay, this time the only array controller I have is this one. But in complicated applications I have more than one I'm sorry more than one array controller. So I'm going to go here and call it somehow. I'm going to call it cars. Okay. Воды.
Говорю, воды принести тебе. Похоже. Ну, как я тебе, я же не знаю, можно говорить или нет.
Okay, let's create our interface now. I want to have a table, and for that I'm going to use NS table view. Going to drag one here, make it like so. Now let me hide this panel. This is like in lecture, I think lecture number 4 is NS table view, and it's placed inside a scroll view, and inside the table I have columns, and inside columns I have cells, and it's just a huge tree. So instead of clicking inside like this, I'm going to bring up this panel, and I'm going to see my whole tree of views and stuff in my view. So I have my window here, the main view, and the scroll view. In there I have a table view, and that's something I want to select because I want to set something for this table view. The first thing I want to set is the content mode of that table view. I'm going to go here, and here the first thing it says content mode cell based. Before macOS 10.6 this was the only choice. I only could have a table with cells, but now I can have a lot of different stuff inside my cell, inside my column of a table, like media, maybe different buttons, objects, images. So I'm going to change this to view-based because I want to have views instead of simple cells. And I want to set number of columns to 3. So now if I go to my table view, I have these 3 columns. So these columns would represent those properties I entered in my model. So this would be make model, and I'm just changing the title. And this would be the price, and the last one would be on special. Okay, so let me resize this because we've lost the last column. Let's make it like this and move it so. Okay, so now I want to modify the columns in there. So I'm going to go to my first column, and in there I have the table cell view, and I don't want that because I want to replace it with something with image, because I want to have a small image of my car and the name of my car. So I'm going to search for image and text table cell view. Going to drag here, and that's fine. For the price, I want the price to be always a currency, always money. So I'm going to find number formatter like so and drag it here. So it gets selected, and here in the style of my number formatter, I want to set it to currency. And let's put this to, yeah, it's by default, it's fine. And the last thing, I want to have a checkbox instead of this boring string. So I'm going to delete this as well and put ns, oh, I can just find checkbox, put it, oh, I'm sorry, in there. I want to delete the text, of course. So I want to take the checkbox like so, put it here, and I think I don't need a label, just the checkbox itself. Okay, that's fine. Now I want to have buttons for this, because, well, I want to add and delete cars. So that gets the push button like this. This would be add, going to select, Command D to duplicate, and this would be remove. Now I want to have a date picker because I want to change the purchase date. So I'm going to put date picker here, and I want to have a level indicator. So that's something to indicate level visually. And the level indicator would be my condition of a car. And let's say condition would be just like a rating. It would be star-based rating. And I want to have it editable because I want to change it. And let's say the maximum value is 5 stars. And let's make it by default 4. Okay, so I also want an image for my car, because here I'm going to just see the image, but I also want to change the image. So I'm going to get image well and put it here. This would be a box where I can just drag any graphics file and it will be saved as an image for that car. So let's make it like this. Let's make it bigger. So I guess that's fine. Okay. So we have the interface and we have the model and we have this cars, and this is a NS array controller which we can reference as cars. Let's make few bindings now, because, well, now nothing would work. This is just an empty interface. It's not connected to my model in any way. So first let me bring up this menu again and get to my table view. I want to select the table view and bind it to my objects. So let me go to bindings, and this is the table view. I want to set the content of my table view to bind to cars, to that NS array controller, and I want to point to arranged objects. And I won't put anything in my model key path because I want to point to the object itself, to the whole object, not a property of that object. So I also need to get selection indices to cars, but instead of arranged objects, I need selection indices. So now I have this table, and it points, it takes information from my array of objects, of cars. And now I can get the number of those cars and just see each car as a line in my table. But I didn't connect those values yet. I just have it in my table, but those columns are not connected yet. So first, let's change the values of each object in my column. Now the first thing I have is this image view, the first thing. So I want to point the value of that image to my table cell view. Now I'm not pointing it to cars or file owner, anything like that. The thing is, my table already is pointed to cars. So each cell would now be connected to a single object. And inside my cell, I want to change this image view to represent an image of that object, so I can just reference my cell view itself. And I want to get object value dot photo, because that's something I created in my model. So let's save that and move on to model. This is static text, and this is object value dot make model, and I'm just putting the names I had in my model. So the same for the price. Oh no, this is the price. So this is the table, and I'm going to bind. I'm always binding the value. So bind table cell view this dot price. And the last time checkbox, bind the value to the on special. Now it knows that that is a Boolean, and Boolean works perfectly well with the checkbox because it has two states. So the value is represented by a Boolean. It's exactly what we want. So so we have all that. Now we want to have this text editable, because when I create a new car, it has no, or it has just the default value, and I want to change it. So this static text, I want to change the behavior to be editable, and same for the price. So I want to select the price, click a few times, get to static text, and change the behavior to editable. Okay, so let's do something we used to. Let me show this panel again, and I want this button to do something on my controller. So of course I'm going to control click and set the target to this cars, and add of course would be the add function, and remove be control click point remove. Okay, so now let's bind those. The date picker should be bound, of course the value of that should be bound to cars selection, and the model key path would be date purchased, and the rating is bind to cars condition, and the remove, I want this button to be disabled when I have nothing to remove. So I'm going to select remove and bind it's enabled in availability to cars, but just can remove. It knows about my object, and it knows about the collection, so when I have nothing to remove, the array controller takes care of that. And the image view, I want to set the value to cars selection. Selection means it just currently selected car, of course, and I want this to be point to photo, and I want this conditionally sets editable. So if I can edit, if it's possible to edit it, I will be able to edit. So I think that's it. Oh yeah, let's make this text to be bold when it's on special, so it's easier to see. So here I have font bold. So get table cell view, object value dot on special. Okay, so hopefully everything's fine. Let me bring up this console and run my application. So let me create a new document. I'm going to file new. I have this. Enabled is, remove is disabled, so I can add new. And I haven't made any default value, so my model is empty. So I call this DeLorean, and I can set the price to be $5,000 and make it on special. That would make it bold. I can change the date and change the rating. So let's make this 5 stars and make it in 80. So I also have an image. So let me bring up the image of a car, take it like this, and just drag it here. So now this is set for this entity. I can add more. Well, this would be something 2101, and that just costs $5. And I have an image for that as well. So that would be 84. This is 80, and this is, let's say, 2 stars, and this is 1 star. So everything works. We didn't write any code. We just created a model and made those connections. Even more, the undo works. Well, it should work as well. And redo works. And saving and loading works. Everything we spent 50 minutes last time works without writing any code. How this is kind of cool, and how it works we're going to explain in module 2.